In this video, let's practice doing some division where we're going to go ahead and use the standard algorithm together. Alright, so that being said, let's go ahead and take this 243.5, that's our first value here, and we're going to actually put that inside our long division house. So I'm going to write 243.5 just like this. And then let's see, on the outside of this, let's go ahead and take our second number. This is going to be this 5 here. Now that is going to be our divisor. So we have our dividend on the inside and we have our divisor on the outside. Right away, what we're going to do is we're going to take this decimal and just bring it straight up and put it up top. So we're going to have a decimal right up top where our answer is going to be. Now, first things first, we're going to take this 5 and see how many times it fits into 2. Now, it doesn't fit in a whole number of times. We're going to put it as 0. It fits in 0 times. Next, we're going to see how many times this 5 fits into 24. Now, go through your 5 times tables, but we can't go over 24. So 5 times 4 is going to be 20, and that's as high as we can go. So I'm going to put a 4 on top here, then take this 4, multiply by this 5. That means we're going to get 20. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just subtract now and see what our remainder is going to be. Now, if we take 24 minus this 20, we're going to see that that is going to be 4. So that's our remainder here. All right. Next, we're going to take this 3 and bring it down. This 3 is going to join the 4, and we're just going to go ahead and repeat this process. How many times does 5 fit into 43? Well, 5 times 8 is 40, but 5 times 9 is 45, so we can't put 9. We're going to go with 8 here. All right, so we put 8 on top. 8 times 5, that's going to be 40. We're going to go and put that underneath the 43. We're going to go ahead and subtract. Our remainder is just this 3 here. Next, we're going to bring this 5 down and repeat this process one more time. I think we're going to be able to stop after this. So let's see how many times 5 fits into 35. I believe 5 times 7 is exactly 35. So we're going to go, it fits in 7 times. That goes on top here. Now the 7 times this 5, that's going to be 35. And so if we subtract, we notice here that there's a remainder of 0. So I'm going to go ahead and just move this down a little bit so we have a little bit of space. But our quotient here is going to be this 48 and 7/10. You don't need that 0 in the beginning. Let's take a look at another one together. For number 2, we have 159 and 8/10. That's this first number here. This is going to be our dividend. And then we have this divisor of 2. So since 2 is a whole number, we can get started right away. So I'm going to go ahead and take this 159 and 8/10. Let's go ahead and put that inside this division house. And let's put that 2 on the outside here. That's our divisor. Now let's start with how many times 2 fits into 1. If it's in 0 times, we can say it doesn't fit into 1 at all. And we can just slide over and say, okay, how many times does 2 go into 15? Well, 2 times 7 is 14, but 2 times 8 is 16, which is too much. So we're going to go with 7 here. So we put a 7 on top, 7 times 2, that's going to be 14. If we go ahead and subtract here, 15 minus the 14, that's going to be 1. And we're going to go ahead and bring down this 9 to make this 19 and repeat the whole process again. So how many times does 2 now fit into 19? Well, 2 times 9 is 18, 2 times 10 is 20, which is too much, so we're going to go with 9 here. Let's put a 9 on top. 9 times this 2 is going to be 18, which is as close as we could get without going over. And we have a remainder of 1, so we were off by 1 there. Finally, we're going to bring down this 8, and we're going to repeat this process again here. Now, how many times does this 2 fit into 18? Well, I think we just said a moment ago, it would go in 9 times, so let's go ahead and put the 9 on top here. So we take this 9 times this 2 is going to be 18, and we can see that our remainder is 0. Now, I didn't say this earlier, but we had this decimal here. We got to bring this straight up. So in our final answer here, we're going to have a quotient, or the answer to a division problem, of 79 and 9/10. Here is number 3. All right, for number 3, we have 1 and 794 thousandths, and then we were dividing this into 3/10. Okay, so we're going to see how many times 3/10 fits into 1 and 794 thousandths. Now, here's a bit of an issue right here. This is not a whole number. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this number and multiply it by 10. But if we do that, we're also going to take this value here and multiply it by 10 as well. Now, whenever you multiply a number by 10, the decimal just slides one space to the right. So our first decimal is going to then be 17 and 94 hundredths. And instead of dividing by this 3/10, we're going to be dividing it by 3 instead. So we're going to go ahead and solve this problem, right? So as long as we multiply both of the dividend and divisor by 10, if we solve this problem, we're going to get the same answer as we would have otherwise. So let's go ahead and set up this long division. So we have 17 and 94 hundredths. That's going to go inside our division house. Okay, and then we're going to put this 3 on the outside. Now, let's go ahead and take this decimal and just bring it straight up so we know where it's going to be in our quotient. Okay, and then just start our long division process. So how many times does 3 fit into 1? It actually fits in 0 times, so you can leave it blank, or we can put a 0 there. How many times does 3 fit into 17? Fits in 5 times. 5 times 3, that's going to be 15. That's as close as we could get. And so we can see that here that we're off by 2. So 17 minus 15 is 2. And then next we're going to bring down this 9 and then repeat the process all over again. All right, so how many times does 3 now fit into 29? Well, 3 times 9 is 27. I think that's as close as we can get. 3 times 10 is 30. So I think we're going to go with a 9 here. Let's put a 9 on top. Once we put this 9 here, let's multiply it by the 3. 9 times 3 is 27. Go ahead and multiply, and then that's going to see that we have a remainder here of 2, because 29 minus 27 is 2. Finally, we're going to bring this 4 down and repeat this process one more time, I think, and see how many times 3 fits into 24. Think about your 3 times tables here, but I believe exactly 8 times. 8 times this 3, 8 times 3, that's going to be the 24. You can see that the remainder here is now going to be 0. All right, so our quotient here is now going to be 5 and 98 hundredths, which means the quotient for our original problem is also 5 and 98 hundredths. Here's number 4. For number 4, we have 23 and 76 hundredths, and we're going to divide this by 8 tenths. Now the second number of 8 tenths, that's the one we need to be a whole number. So what do we have to multiply it by to become a whole number? Well, if we multiply it by 10, it'll become a whole number, so we should do that to both of these values. Now 23 and 76 hundredths times 10 becomes 237 and 6 tenths. And then we're going to go ahead and divide that by 8 tenths times 10 just becomes 8, which is now a whole number. So we can go ahead and now divide just because we have a whole number for our divisor, or that second number. All right, so let's take this 237.6. Let's go ahead and put it inside our long division house, and 8 is going to come right on the side here as our divisor. All right, let's begin now. Let's put this decimal straight up in the beginning so we know where it is. 8 is going to fit into 2 0 times. It's larger than it, so we're going to say it doesn't fit in at all. But how many times does 8 fit into 23? Well, 8 times 3 is 24, which is a little bit too high, so we have to go with 8 times 2, unfortunately. So we'll put a 2 here, and so once we put a number up top, we multiply it by the side, so 2 times 8, that's going to be 16, and then we're off by what? This 23 minus 16, I believe, is going to be 7, so I'll put a 7 there, and let's go ahead and bring down our next number here. So let's go ahead and bring down this 7. If we bring down the 7, we're going to now have 77 on the bottom, and we're going to repeat the process. So let's repeat the process. How many times does 8 go into 77? Well, 8 times 9 is 72, and 8 times 10 is 80, which is too much. So we're going to have to go with 9 here, all right? Put this 9 up top. 9 times 8, that's 72. Go ahead and put that underneath, and we're going to see how far we were off by. Our remainder here is going to be 5. 77 minus 72 is 5. And then we have the 6 that we're going to go ahead and bring down and repeat the process again. So how many times does 8 go into 56? Well, 8 times 7 is exactly 56. So we're going to go with a 7 up top. If we put the 7 here, 7 times 8, that's going to get us 56. And we can see here that we got it perfectly, so there's no remainder. So the quotient, or the answer to the division problem, is 29 and 7 tenths. That was our rewritten problem, but again, that's going to be the same quotient or answer to the original problem, as long as we multiplied both the dividend and divisor by 10. Here's number 5. For number 5, we have 5 and 256 thousandths. We're going to divide that by 1 and 2 tenths. Now, this 1 and 2 tenths needs to be a whole number for our standard algorithm, so we're going to go ahead and multiply it by 10, because we just need to move the decimal once to the right. Let's go ahead and multiply our dividend by 10 as well. So our new dividend is going to be 52 and 56 hundredths, and then our new divisor here isn't going to be 1 and 2 tenths, rather it's going to be 12, which is a whole number. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We can take this 52 and 56 hundredths, go ahead and put it inside our division problem, or division house, and then 12 is going to go on the outside. So we need to know our 12 times tables here. All right, so how many times does 12 fit into 5? Well, it fits in 0 times. We're going to put a 0 up top here. So how many times does 12 fit into 52? Okay. Now, if you need to write your multiplication out, feel free to do so on the side. I'm going to put a 4 up here. I think 5 times 12 is 60, which is too much. I think 4 times 12 is going to be 48. And that was as close as we could get without going over. All right. We can see the remainder here. 52 minus 48 should be 4. And we can go ahead and just bring down this 5 and then repeat the process all over again. All right, so how many times does 12 fit into 45? Well, we just said a moment ago that 12 times 4 was 48, which is too much. So we're going to have to go with 3 here. All right, now what is 3 times 12? 3 times 12, if you need to pause and do it on the side, go ahead and do so. That's going to be 36. And so we have 45 minus 36. If you go ahead and subtract, we should end up with 9. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take this 6 here that hasn't been used and bring it down. We now have 96 down here. We're going to repeat the process again. So how many times does 12 fit into 96? Well, you should go ahead and try some multiplication on the side here, but it turns out that 8 multiplied by this 12, 8 times 12 is exactly 96. And so we can see here that that was the exact number we were looking for. So our quotient here we're finding out is going to be 4 38/100ths. That was our rewritten problem, but that happens again to be the same quotient that we were looking for from the original problem. Here's number 6. For number 6, we have 235 75/100ths. We're going to divide that by 2 5/10. Now this second number here, our divisor needs to be a whole number, so we can go ahead and do that or get that by multiplying it by 10. And so if we multiply both of these values by 10, we're going to have, instead of 235, it's going to be 2,357.5 or 5/10. And divided by, instead of 2 5/10, it's going to be 25. So let's go ahead and solve this version of the problem. So we'll go ahead and write this 2,357.5, and we're going to see how many times 25 is going to fit into it. So put 25 over here. Our decimal is going to just go right above where it was in the problem, and see how many times, to begin here, does 25 fit into 2? Well, it doesn't fit into 2, so it goes in 0 times. Then we see how many times does 25 fit into 23? Well, it also fits in 0 times, so we know our answer can only have 2 whole numbers here. 25 fitting into 235. You might need to do some multiplication on the side here, but it's going to end up being 9. So feel free to pause to think about that a little bit. But this 9 times 25 is 225, and that's as close as we can get without going over. Now this 235 minus the 225, that's going to be a remainder of 10. And we're going to take this 7 and just bring it down so we can repeat the whole process again. Now 25 into 107, this is a little bit easier. Fits in 4 times without going over, so we'll put a 4 up top. 4 times 25 is 100, so it's as close as we get without going over. And we were off by how much? Well, this 107 minus 100 tells us that we were off by 7. Let's go ahead and take this 5 and bring it down and repeat this process one last time, I think. So let's see how many times does 25 fit into 75. Fits in 3 times exactly, right? Because 3 times 25 is exactly 75. And we can see here that the remainder is 0, so we're all done. Our quotient here for our rewritten problem was 94 3/10, which means the quotient for the original problem was also 94 3/10. Here's number 7. For number 7, we have this 742 10,000ths. We're going to go ahead and divide, see how many times 1400ths is going to fit inside of there, right? Now, this 1400ths, we need to be a whole number and has 2 decimal places. So if we go ahead and multiply it by 100, that's going to move it over 2 times to the right. So we're going to have to multiply this by 100 as well. So what's this new problem going to look like? I think it's going to be 7 42/100ths if we move the decimal twice to the right. And instead of dividing by this 1400ths, it's now just going to be 14. All right, so this hopefully looks a little bit less scary, and if we solve this, then we can solve the original problem. Let's take this 7 42/100ths, put it inside our division house. That's our dividend, and our divisor here is 14. All right, let's take the decimal and just bring it straight up first. Now, does 14 fit into 7? It's too big, doesn't fit in a whole time, so let's put a 0 here. And so we can take the 0 and say 0 times this 14, that's going to be 0. So we're going to subtract and say that our remainder here is just going to be this 7. Then we can go ahead and take this 4 and bring it down. All right, and repeat the process here. So 14 going into 74. You might need to do some multiplication and pause the video for a moment, but I think it's going to be 5 here. I think 6 is too much, so I'm going to put a 5 up top because I know 5 times 14 is 70. And if we subtract here, 74 minus 70 means we were off by 4. So we're going to put that there. And then let's go ahead and bring this 2 down that we haven't used yet, and then see if we can finish this without any more remainders. So how many times does this 14 fit into 42 without going over? Well, again, you might need to pause to do your 14 times tables on the side. Turns out it's going to be 3, because 3 times 14 is exactly this 42. You can see the remainder here is 0. So our quotient here is just going to be 53 hundredths, okay? And that means our quotient for the original problem is also 53 hundredths. All right, here is one final example. So for number 8, we have this decimal here. We have 1 and 9,044 10,000ths, and we're going to divide this by this 23 hundredths. So this 23 hundredths needs to be a whole number for our standard algorithm. We can go ahead and turn that into a whole number by multiplying it by 100 to move the decimal twice to the right. Let's go ahead and multiply our dividend also by 100. So our new dividend, if we move the decimal twice to the right, is going to be 190 and 44 hundredths. And then our new divisor here isn't going to be 0.23, it's just going to be 23. That's a whole number now. So if we can solve this, then we can solve the original problem. So let's go ahead and take this 190.44, or 190 and 44 hundredths, and see how many times 23 fits into it. All right, the answer to this is going to be the answer to the original problem. So 23 into 1, it fits in 0 times. Let's go ahead and put a 0 up top here. Now, what about 23 fitting into 19? Well, that's still 0 times because 23 is larger. But what about 23 into 190? Let's see, you might need to do some multiplication on the side, but I think it's going to be 8. Let's put 8 here. 8 times 23, I believe, is going to be 160 plus 24 is going to be 184. Okay, I think that's as close as we can get because we're only off by 6 here, which hopefully makes sense. 190 minus 184 is going to be 6. Forgot to bring this decimal up here, so I'm going to do that right now. Let's take this 4 and bring it down, and let's repeat the process again. All right, so let's take this 23 and see how many times it fits into 64. 2 of them is 46, 3 of them is going to get us a little bit too much, I think. So I'm going to go with 2 here. I'm going to put a 2 on top. So 2 times this 23, that's going to be 46. Okay, so let's see, 64 minus this 46, I think that's going to be 18. Again, feel free to pause if you need to do that subtraction. But then we're going to bring down this 4 here and then repeat the process again. Now notice from earlier that we put an 8 here and we got 184. We have this 184 again, so we actually know that this is going to be 8. So 8 times this 23 is going to be 184. So we have a remainder here of 0. So here is our quotient. It's going to be 8 and 28 hundredths. So we can say that the quotient here is going to be 8 and 28 hundredths. All right, so there you have 8 different practice problems where we're dividing decimals. Make sure that second number is a whole number. If it is, it's a little bit less work. If it is a decimal though, don't worry, just go ahead and multiply both dividend and divisor by 10 or 100 or 1,000 as needed, and then just repeat the process. So hopefully you found the video helpful. If you did, feel free to give the video a thumbs up and let a classmate know or a friend who might also find this video helpful. And as always, keep up the great work that you're already doing, and I'll see you in the next one.